Hello everyone, my name is Alice Bodoc and I'm a senior lecturer of Romanian linguistics in the Department of Theoretical and Applied Linguistics at Transilvania University from Brasov, Romania. My research interests focus on the morphosyntactic structure and development of Romance languages, more precisely on the adverbial clauses, and the paper that I'm going to present here today is only a small part of a bigger project that I'm working on. The presentation is entitled Syntactic Dislocation Phenomena in the Adverbial Clauses of Romance Languages, a Comparative Perspective. This paper presents some important aspects concerning the syntactic configuration of Romanian, Italian, and French clausal adjuncts as they appear in the articles from the present-day media. My premise is that a minimal discourse unit of media communication provides an excellent locus for investigating the complex sentences, as it expresses an embodiment of speaker's experience as a way of communication and ultimately as a form of understanding the world. The elements investigated here relate to the syntax information structure interface, such as scrambling, interpolation, left dislocations, and these are going to be discussed by comparison for the complex sentences with temporal and causal adjuncts. So the following research questions are in the focus of interest. Is there cross-linguistic and language internal variation inside the family of Romance languages? How do these three languages differ from each other? What is the effect of information structure on word order in Romanian, Italian, and French adjuncts? And is the prodrop feature a determining factor for the cross-linguistic variation at the syntax information structure interface? The aim of this paper is to provide a comprehensive descriptive account of the relationship between information structure and the word order in Romance temporal and causal adjuncts. My first objective is to quantify the degree of productivity of these linguistic phenomena in the three kindred languages through a corpus-based analysis. The second objective is to describe the syntactic configurations that Romanian, Italian, and French resort to in order to fulfill various discourse roles. And finally, my third objective will be to put forward the assumption that all three languages behave similarly as concerns the syntax information structure interface, although French has been usually interpreted as being special due to its word order restrictions. As concerns the corpus and the methodology, to the best of my knowledge, there are no corpora available which would allow for a thorough comparative statistical analysis of word order in Romanian, Italian, and French. So the first step was to build a contemporary Romance corpus, the so-called ROAMED corpus. And in order to do that, I found some international magazines and national newspapers published online during 2015 and 2019. I extracted an equal number of words from each of these publications, around 500,000 words. After organizing the corpus, I searched for the complex sentences with temporal and causal adjuncts. I extracted manually all the context in which they appear, and I created a database according to the linguistic features that are going to be compared. A total number of 1,697 complex sentences were selected, and the following categories were organized, and there you have the numbers for each type of adjunct. From a methodological point of view, the paper combines corpus analysis with comparative analysis in order to get a deeper understanding of the impact of information structure categories on a word order of Romance adjunct clauses. In order to understand how this relationship works in the temporal and causal adjuncts from Romance languages, I will present first some basic concepts. The first one is the word order. It is generally accepted the idea that most of the Romance languages inherited the Latin syntactic configuration of the sentence and also its relative free word order. This is the case of Romanian and Italian that allow, under the right circumstances, of course, any ordering of the major constituent subject, verb, direct object. And even the case of French, although this language has more rigid restrictions. In all these languages, the common and dominant unmarked order of the body of a declarative main clause is CVO, and the grammatical subject corresponds to the topic. In their study on Spanish, Italian, and French, Lahoz and Lamiroy provide arguments to sustain the assumption that the different word order patterns can be accounted for in terms of grammaticalization, and their results were included in Table 1. Of course, my first intention was to see where does Romanian fit in this table, and in order to do that, I gave examples for the 6 possible orders of a sentence, and I evaluated their acceptability from the point of view of a native speaker. So the examples under 1 prove that compared to other kindred languages, Romanian is a free word order language, very similar to Spanish, allowing all the possible combinations and less restrictive than Italian and French. Some linguists consider that the relative word order freedom is a feature of null subject or prodrop languages, such as Romanian, Spanish, and Italian, while French lost the Latin prodrop feature in the 14th century as a result of the progressive fixation of the subject in preverbal position. It is also important to understand that the constituents are arranged in a sentence following certain rules in order for the speaker to send a proper message to its audience and thus to serve discourse purposes. The conscious or unconscious choices that we make when we speak or write signal on the one hand the most important parts of the message and on the other hand the relation of the information to the linguistic context. Therefore, on the sentence level, we usually place the already known information at the beginning of the sentence, while the new information is placed toward the end. Cross-linguistically, there are different means of structuring the discourse information and many concepts that researchers use in their studies to describe the interplay between syntax and information structure. Given, new, theme, rime, topic, command, topic, focus are just a few of the distinctions taken into consideration. And although it has received a variety of interpretations in the linguistic literature, the latter pair of notions, topic and focus, is the most relevant for my analysis. Defined in terms of given and new information, the concepts of topic and focus are quite easy to understand. The topic correlates to the given information, and the focus to the new information not mentioned before in the discourse. Focusing is also a strategy of foregrounding specific information by means of giving it emotional coloring and helps the speaker or the writer to shape the pragmatic core of the discourse. In Romanian, both contrastive and informational focus appear in the preverbal domain of the sentence, the so-called left periphery, and is marked through intonation and sometimes associated with word order changes or with focalizers, as you can see in examples under 2 and 3. Both topic and focus prefer the initial position of the sentence, and sometimes this might be confusing, but the difference is that the topic is unmarked while the focus bears phrastic accent and can take focalizers to its left. Based on this idea, the process of placing a constituent in initial position to mark its topic role was called topicalization, and it can be realized in Romanian using various types of fronting constructions, such as fronting or topicalization proper, left dislocation, or hanging topic. The starting point of the analysis is that the non-CVO syntactic configurations from temporal and causal adjuncts appear in special constructions of the journalistic Roman corpus in order to indicate a particular information status. These special constructions involve dislocations, interpolations, and scrambling. As there are many different definitions and sometimes competing definitions of these terms, it is very important at this moment to explain the meanings adopted in the present paper. So dislocation is the term that I use whenever a constituent is detached from its sentential core position and moved to another place. According to Klein, the main types of dislocations are the following: left and right dislocations, cleft constructions, and presentationals. We shall see in the following sections of this article that all these types of dislocations occur also in Italian and Romanian, not only in French, where you have the examples. And the most frequent is the clitic left dislocation. This phenomenon was called clitic left dislocation by Cinque and appears when the direct and indirect objects realized as determined noun phrases or as pronouns are placed in initial position in the obligatory presence of a clitic resumption. Îi scriu băiatului, I write to the boy, băiatului îi scriu, it is the boy to whom I write. Hegeman investigates very carefully the Roman clitic left dislocations as a way of expressing the topic comment articulation of this sentence, and her study is very important for me because on the one hand it provides arguments to support the internal information structure of adverbial clauses, and on the other hand it provides many examples from Romance languages. Unfortunately, it lacks Romanian data, and from this point of view the present research fills a gap in the comparative Roman studies. Interpolations, another way of affecting the CVO configuration, a special type of dislocation. The term was first used by Chenery, refer to dislocation that imply the pronominal clitic and the verb. Some linguists use the term interpolation and scrambling in free variation, but for this paper I make a clear distinction between the two concepts, although I do not deny their similarities. From my point of view, the interpolation is a pragmatic strategy that directly affects the verb, and it can be illustrated by the following configurations: auxiliary adverb verb, negation clitic adverb verb. In these patterns, the verbal nucleus of a sentence is interrupted by one or more interpolated constituents, and in Romanian, these constituents might be the adverbs mai and more, she, immediately, to, tot, still, prea, tu, and so on. So only 5 adverbs in Romanian. Scrambling is a stylistically driven process used by the speaker to derive the alternative orders. In this paper, I use the term scrambling with an extended meaning for all the syntactic configurations in which a free word order permutation occurs. So examples from B to F are of these scrambled constructions. After this generous presentation of the theoretical framework, let's discuss the results of the corpus analysis. All the previously described linguistic phenomena were searched for in the Roman corpus, and the quantitative results are summarized in these 2 diagrams. As concerns the temporal adjuncts, the first diagram illustrates the fact that the most of the extracted subordinate clauses follow the canonical CVO pattern, but there are also many structures in which the prototypical order is slightly affected or even highly modified. It should be noted that not all the extracted adjuncts were registered in this diagram, as I decided to leave aside the temporal and causal adjuncts in which the connector is followed by an infinitive, and also the adjuncts with non-realized or absent subject. This feature, also known as null pronominal subject, is specific to the so-called prodrop languages, such as Romanian and Italian, and unlike French temporal adjuncts, in which subject realization is obligatory, almost a half of the extracted Romanian temporal adjuncts and many Italian adjuncts have this type of subject or have no subject at all. So the diagrams illustrate that on the one hand, the CVO configuration is prototypical for both types of adjuncts and for all the 3 languages investigated, and on the other hand, they behave similarly as far as the linguistic phenomena affecting the word order are concerned. From a qualitative point of view, the results of the Roman corpus analysis are revealing for the morphosyntactic flexibility and complexity of Romance languages. Although there are authors who argue that French has a fixed word order, or that the prodrop languages behave differently than the non-prodrop French language, as concerns the relationship between information structure and word order, they are partially contradicted by the results of the quantitative analysis. In this section, I bring evidence that all 3 languages varieties have word order preferences, just like other Romance languages, and modified configurations, and that they share many linguistic features, although French is more restrictive. So, as results from the diagrams, left dislocated elements in the corpus occur in adjunct clauses covering about 12% percent of the total number, which seems quite a high percentage. The distribution for each of the three investigated languages is illustrated by the diagram 3. The dislocated or moved element can be an adverb or an adverbial phrase, as you can see in 9, 10, 11, a modal adverbial, as you can see in 12 and 13, a prepositional phrase, as you can see in 14, 15, and 16. We notice that the dislocated element is placed in the initial position of the adjunct clause, the first position after the temporal or the causal connector, and preceding the realized subject. Clitic or left dislocations are also available in temporal and causal adjuncts from Romanian, Italian, and French, and the argument position taken by the detached element is that of a direct object, as you can see in 17, 18, 19, and or an indirect object, as you can see in example under 20. All these examples show that we have some formal properties of the Romance adjuncts with left dislocations. The dislocated elements can be either arguments or non-arguments of arguments of the verb. The dislocation can be interpreted as a strategy for marking the topic or the focus of a sentence. Dislocations of the non-argument elements are syntactically optional and sometimes, but not necessarily, appears an intonation break between the left dislocated element and the remainder of the utterance. As concerns the interpolation, it is very interesting as well, although not very productive. Considering the variety of French adverbs that can be interpolated, I would have expected the percentage to be higher in this language as compared to Romanian, in which only 5 adverbs can occur in such constructions. Fortement, vraiment, bien, brutalement, infiniment, subtout are the French adverbs found in the interpolated structures, besides the forms from these examples. And the patterns with interpolated elements are the following: negation, auxiliary, adverb, and verb, clitic, verb, and verb, as you can see in 23 and 24, auxiliary, adverb, verb, as you can see in example 26, negation, clitic, verb, as you can see in these examples. Unlike in French, scrambling is less restricted in Romanian and Italian, making it possible to create many configurations. The VS type accounts for as much as 10% of temporal and causal adjuncts in Romanian, 12% in Italian, and only 2% in French. Scrambled clauses can have the following configurations: OSV, COV, and VS, OVS, or VSO. This last pattern is very interesting and received much attention in literature on Romance word order, and it is the most provoking, yet there are still many aspects to be revealed, and it is worth further investigation. So I bring arguments that the VS configurations from Romanian, Italian, and French are licensed by specific or additional factors, and a very important factor is the fronting of a spatial or temporal adjunct. As you can see in all these examples, the moved constituent is usually highlighted with a full rise intonation and takes a focused position, sometimes with a contrastive interpretation. And another factor is the presence of one or more explicit indications of the focal interpretation of the subject, such as the fronting of negation. And you can see here some examples also. And now let's see the conclusions. In this paper, I have shown that all the linguistic phenomena viewed as specific to the main clauses, such as interpolation, left dislocations, or scrambling, also appear in the temporal and causal subordinate clauses from Romanian, Italian, and French, proving that they also have a strong relationship between information structure and order. We have seen that the canonical CVO order of all three languages can be affected by these processes, although French has more restrictions from this point of view. Left dislocation and scrambling are usually caused by information structure of the context and obey several structural and discourse constraints. All in all, the results presented in this paper bring evidence for the complexity of the Romance varieties and represent a more refined understanding of the order variation from the complex sentences. Romanian, Italian, and French are sister languages that share many typological features, and this aspect confirms the importance of comparative studies. And here you have the corpus, some of the references, and thank you for your attention.